We're here with Bob Wilber. I'm tossing names at him, and he is doing this wonderful free associative ramble. Every story is very interesting. You were talking before about Sidney Catlett, who's one of my great heroes. So you met him in Nice in '48 when he was over with Lewis's All-Stars?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, well, let's see, in that band would have been Arvell Shaw, Dick Carey on piano, or Earl Hines, I'm not sure.
Let me see. Was that, by that time, I think Earl Hines had joined the band.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jack Teagarden.
Jack Teagarden. Yeah.
What do you remember about Sidney?
About Sidney
Catlett.
I just remember that he was a big giant of a guy, and he played the drums. He kind of sat up above the drums and played them with great gentle touch, and just his time was absolutely perfect. In fact, everything, when you played with him, it felt like it wasn't going as fast as it really was, because it seemed so easy. And he was a delightful guy. When I called him, he was freelancing around New York. He'd left the Armstrong All-Stars, and that's when Cozy Cole came in on drums. And he was having some medical problems, so he was not feeling the greatest, but he was freelancing. And I knew he was around New York, so I found out his number and called him, and I told him I was going to open this new club in Boston called Storyville, and that I would love to have him come in on drums. And I said, I've got Sidney to Paris on trumpet, and I have his brother Wilber on trombone, and a local bass player in Boston, John Field, who was like the best bass player in Boston at that time. And let me see who else was in the band. Oh, I had met this piano player when I had the band at, I had the trio actually at the Savoy Cafe, and he was with this band that came in through for a 2 or 3 week engagement. Saxophone player, he used to play alto with Count Basie. Tab Smith. And so Red Richards was the piano player.
Oh, what a great piano player.
And I loved his playing, so I had Red Richards on piano. And because I had established a good name with the traditional jazz following of young college kids at Harvard and MIT and so forth, because of my years at Savoy, so it was a natural thing for George Wein, for his first venture with a nightclub, to ask me to put the band together.
Great. You remind me of somebody, which is you, I think, played with or knew a little bit, a drummer who nobody talks about, who was Kaiser Marshall.
Kaiser Marshall, oh yeah. Well, of course, he was the original drummer with the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra. And when I got this offer to put together a trio to play opposite the 6 or 7 piece bands that usually worked at the Savoy, the plan was they would play a 40-minute set, and then I would fill in with the trio with 20 minutes. And so Kaiser, I think when I first went up there with a trio, I had Dick Wellston on piano and Baby Dodds on drums.
Goodness.
Of course, I had met Baby. He was the drummer with the Mesro band when we went to France. And marvelous. He was a lovely man and a marvelous drummer. He was very serious about his role as a jazz drummer. He would go in and play, do a little practicing earlier on before we went to work. And so, but then he had to leave. He had something else to go to. So then I got Kaiser Marshall on drums. Kaiser was a marvelous drummer and delightful guy. I had great luck with my early exposure to the great drummers of the swing era, including Sidney Catlett, who was, I think, universally respected as maybe the best jazz drummer of all, or one of the great drummers.
And with Tab Smith's band at the time, you mentioned Tab Smith, he may have had Walter Johnson on drums, who was the Henderson drummer for a long time also.
Right,
so you're surrounded by all these guys.
I know. And, well, let me see, what are the drummers from that era I worked with?
Later on, though, you worked with Tommy Benford.
Tommy Benford, yeah, who, of course, was principally known in jazz for being on the old Jelly Roll Morton, Red Hot Peppers records. He was a lovely guy and a marvelous drummer.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate in working with great drummers from that era. Then when I went to work with Eddie Condon's at his club, he had George Wetling on drums, who was a great drummer. Then the first drummer that was playing with the world's greatest jazz band was
Gus Johnson?
No, before Gus Johnson.
Maury Feld.
Maury Feld, yeah. Maury was a marvelous drummer. I think maybe the best drummer for Benny Goodman, because he had a way of playing with Benny where when Benny would go down the lower register, Maury would go sort of underneath him, you know. He was very marvelous, and then he had tragically died when he was still quite young. So that's when Gus Johnson came in on drums.
The other person you're making me think of is you work with Cliff Lehman sometimes.
With Cliff Lehman many times, yeah. Cliff was another one of the marvelous drummers of that era.
Here's an odd name for you, but I saw on one of the CDs I've been listening to of yours, you work with the guitarist Barry Goldbreath.
Barry, yeah.
Any nobody knows about him. Any
well,
memories?
he was living, I remember, in Jersey, and he was one of the freelance drummers around New York. I'm trying to think where I actually worked with him, but I had a job at a little club in Jersey that for a while he played drums with my group there.
Well, guitar. This is.
I mean, no guitar.
Yeah.
I mean,
because he's on your on the record "Spread and Joy."
Oh yeah,
that's
right.
how I know of him.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and he was a very well respected freelance player, excellent guitarist.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back in a moment.
Okay.